Well, hello and welcome to the Shoot-Off Archery Podcast. I'm your host, Bernardo Oliveira, Brazilian Olympic archer. Here every 2 weeks, we have one-on-one in-depth conversations with some of the biggest names in our sport. And today, I'm very, very happy to be joined by Jarryd, a former international archer from Australia, now coach and founder of Rogue Archery. Jarryd, I'm super, super happy to have you over in the show. Thank you so much for your time. For someone who doesn't know you, how would you introduce yourself in about 30 seconds and also how to pronounce your surname?
My surname is, we say Gracious, is the easy way. So uh,
Sounds easy,
go
gracious.
for it. But yeah, the way I would introduce myself is to say that I'm an archery coach. But of course, as you mentioned, I run my own archery academy here and also have like an online coaching program where we work with students in over 20 countries. And yeah, also a family man.
We'll touch into that later. But you said I mentioned in the beginning, and you were international archer before, and that's how we met.
It is.
Um, a long time ago, longer than it feels, to be honest. It
Yeah.
was in, I think, Poland, the World Cup stage in 2013.
I remember the
So
exact
that makes
moment
it,
we met. Yeah.
in the practice field, if I remember correctly, or near the cafeteria or something. But
Yes.
um, uh, tell us about like what moment you were going through in your career or as a person back then. Like you were shooting at a World Cup. That is amazing in itself.
Well, yes, it is. And it was definitely that year back in 2013 was actually a really pivotal year in my archery journey, if we call it that. But, compared to some of your other guests, I actually have a sort of a rather unimpressive international career compared to many of the people you normally talk to. Uh, but but that competition was very pivotal because it was really when I got a taste of the big leagues, if that made sense. And that was when I was just finishing university, and so I was working as a junior civil engineer, and I had done quite well domestically, like I'd won a lot of national titles and things, and done very, very well within Australia. But I got to the stage where I could make a national team. But as I quickly learned, there were levels to this game, and basically, when I stepped into that international circuit, I was woefully unprepared and I had no idea what I was in for. And at that time, there was no really support to help me to get there. And after that event, I had to do some kind of soul searching because I thought, am I even good at this sport anymore? Um, but that was actually a huge motivation for me to like go further, study more, learn more about the sport. And I don't think I'd be where I am today or the coach that I am today if I didn't have that experience, if that makes sense.
It does make total sense. Something I want to pick on
Mm.
what you said. You said you didn't feel prepared and that you had some soul searching to do and so much that you felt you had to learn and to do to be a better athlete because you suddenly came into the world stage and realized that there was this huge gap between you and the rest of the world and some of the best archers in the world. 2013 is only in inverted commas 13 years after Simon Fairweather, who was someone I interviewed here in the show. But Simon Fairweather, your countryman, he won the
Mm.
Olympics in Sydney. So one would assume that there was this huge heritage and this whole knowledge that stayed over, or not really.
Yeah, so that's not exactly how it is. I don't think that's exactly correct. Because Australia is a massive country. And in Australia, archery is a very minority sport. Even though we've had some athletes who have done really well over the years, we actually have a rather shallow talent pool of people who can perform at the highest levels. And so this is one of the challenges is that we have a huge country, we have a shallow talent pool, and there actually hasn't been a history of great development structures that exist. And so almost all of the coaching that happens within Australia is by kind of individual coaches and volunteers at community clubs. And so if you're lucky, you get great support and you find a great coach. And I was very lucky with my coach, Rick, who mentored me and taught me a lot and got me to the level that I got to. But also, because the country is so big and the talent pool is so shallow, you really don't get exposed to like a cluster of competition, and you can very easily find yourself being like a big fish in a small pond, or winning every competition you enter just simply because there's not that density of competition. Does that make sense?
It does, because it sounds a lot like Brazil,
Yeah.
honestly, and in the aspect that it's a big country, and then what you said, I think, is perfect, to feel like you're the big fish in a small pond.
And that's one thing I've learned from connecting with a lot of coaches and archers around the world is that originally I felt like it was just unique to my club. And then I went around a bit and thought, oh, no, it's just Australia. And then when I connected with more people overseas, I realized, well, this is a problem that many people experience. And whilst there are a lot of great coaches and great resources available, it's not always accessible to the majority of archers.
Now, I feel like you're leaving hints, and like you're queuing for some of the lots of things that we can talk about that I've written down that I want to ask you to. But just to link to, because, well, you have your own archery academy, Rogue Archery, and you're mentioning like this lack of support, of knowledge that you thought was local to your reality or to Australia, but then you realized actually it's a worldwide thing. But then in between Jarryd as a coach today and that athlete in 2013, you said you went back home and you felt like you had soul searching to do. What happened after that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that soul searching was really a redefining of my self-identity. Because you go through almost a little bit of a rebirth when you have to, like I said, you can be winning everything and setting records back home, and then to go overseas and put in a poor performance really does shine a light on your own, your own weaknesses and the areas you need to improve. So I actually found that incredibly motivating, and in the several years following that, I went on a bit of a pilgrimage to really figure out how to get good. And so, I went and I studied all the top archers and I pulled all the video footage that I can offline, and I went and trained in Korea for a little bit, and I started to gain this understanding of what really mattered. And at the same time, again, I've never been a professional archer through this period. I was working and coaching and trying to train as well. So juggling that balance was also something that I was trying to navigate. And that's something that I think a lot of archers also struggle with, and it's different for a lot of professional archers have their own challenges where they have to meet, performance obligations and training obligations to, maintain scholarships and get funding and all that sort of stuff. But even to get to that level, often I think it's very challenging for archers to, navigate the challenges of juggling life admin with your work and your family and your school commitments and studying and all of that. Do you know what I mean?
100%, 100%. Because just the other day I was talking to someone about how I feel that to be a top performer athlete, it's not only technique, only training. It's a lot about the choices you make in life, who you surround yourself with, what you do when you're at home, when you're not out of the field, what you do. These decisions, they shape your performance in the end.
Well, we had a long chat about this in Winnipeg, didn't we? And talking about as well, I know some of the decisions you made in your life to, pursue your athletic career and move overseas and train with the best coaches and things. I mean, that's what it takes, right?
I feel a little torn about that because the result wasn't the one I hoped for athletically, but 100%. And to give some context here, the funny thing is we met in 2013 in Poland, and then the next time we met was just last summer in Winnipeg in Canada. So 12 years afterwards, but we managed to stay in touch all this time, and yeah, just really happy to have this connection with you. Going back to what you said, that you did this pilgrimage, I love this term. And so you said you went to Korea. Where in Korea did you go to? And did you go to other places as well?
Let me think. So I trained with Coach Kim for a while, Kim Young-taek at his archery school. And actually, also a shout out to Johan Wies. I don't know if you know Johan well, but he was training there at the time.
Yes, the Danish guy
Yeah.
who was there.
Yeah, he's an amazing archer. And actually, I feel like I learned a lot from him as well, training together for that bit of time. But that was really fascinating for me, because one of the things I realized in my time there, well, I learned a lot, but I learned the biggest difference was there was no secret. As in, I had this misconception in my mind that, the Koreans, there must be some secret ninja technique that they know that I don't know. And if only I can figure it out, right, that I can also be good. And what I learned was, no, it's the same stuff that you're already doing. They're just better at it. And I learned a lot about, attention to detail. The things, the tiniest little, you think your anchor's good, but what if you look at it under a microscope? And what if you look at it from this angle and this angle and this angle? And how does it change if you get fatigued? And the smallest movement in your head position, your body posture throughout the shot process. And if you start to change and manipulate your hand with a little bit of hand tension, then all of this was extracted. And the attention to detail was something that also was highlighted to me. Because before that, I feel like I had a fairly good understanding of technique fundamentals, but it was maybe lower resolution. And so that was instructive. And then from speaking to Johan as well, it was very interesting. Because he was living in Korea at the time and had spent a long time there. And he shined a bit of a light to me on, I guess, some of the cultural differences and the systemic differences in terms of how their archers are developed through their structures as well. And I started to gain an understanding for how, obviously why Korea is so good, but also why that wouldn't necessarily work in Australia or in other places. It's different in many ways.
It's fascinating to hear you say that, because even though it's funny, Australia, you guys are on, more on the Korea side of the world, but it feels like, much more Western mentality, culture, society, and everything. But me too, I've been to Coach Kim's academy. I've been to other places in Korea as well. And I'm a firm believer that if we just try and copy everything Korea does, it's not going to work, because they go through a different process. It's a total different mindset as a society, how they go about things. And so we don't need to copy them and all the outstanding archers outside of Korea, in Europe, USA, Australia. They're the proof that, yeah, it doesn't have to be copy-paste. We can adapt. And so I'm assuming that this is what you did, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, I took things from many places, and also put my own spin on it, because in my coaching context, I'm working with people at all levels. I'm not getting to cherry pick archers, or I'm not, say, recruiting the top talent from around Australia and then working with a handful of 5 people or whatever. I've got beginners and intermediate archers, and then some of them want to go all the way to the Olympics, and some of them we're quite happy if they can, add 10 points to their indoor score by next year, and that's totally fine, right? So we needed something that was a versatile structure that can work and can basically be progressive, where it can help people move up that pathway at whatever level they are. That was what I try and aspire to do.
And you said you were juggling all of these things: professional life, personal life, archery, coaching, all of these things. And it makes me think of, I believe a lot of people who might be listening to us, they're not professional full-time archers. They are the everyday people who do archery, and maybe, as you said, next season they want to try and add 10 points to their indoor score. And from your coaching experience, what you feel are like the most common mistakes that a casual archer makes, for example? What is something that you see time and time again, and it feels like you just have to preach this to the whole world and try to get people to understand these things?
Oh, there's so many mistakes that archers make. So I thought about this for a while because there are so many mistakes that are made at the amateur level of archery and the amateur level of coaching. But I came up with 5 if you'd like to hear them.
Absolutely. That's what I'm here for.
Perfect. So the first one I came up with was that archers focus a lot on the sexy parts of the shot, like the release, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's perfect.
And so it's the release, it's like the follow through and stuff. But they will neglect foundational parts of the structure, their posture and their head position and their anchor, and how all of those things in the structure lead towards a clean execution and consistent and stable base. And so that was my first mistake, is that they don't focus on structure first. They focus on execution, or they jump around without having a bit of a systematic approach to building themselves as an archer. Do you agree?
Yes. So if I got it correctly, what you're saying is people, they want to have a shot that looks good, but they do it not knowing what they're doing, and then in the end they just have this bizarre shot.
Or it's like, imagine if you were building a house, is a good metaphor, and they're focusing on, the tiling and the kitchen vanity, and the cabinetry and the architraves and all the things that you actually see. But behind the scenes, the plumbing is leaking and the foundation's sinking into the ground, and like the roof is not insulated, and all the stuff that is so important to building a house
But it's not sexy.
it's not sexy. So, and so by prioritizing the wrong things, or not understanding how things affect other things, not understanding how your anchor, for example, is a reference between your head and your hand. So if your head position's wrong and your hand is in the wrong shape, then your anchor is wrong. And so you have to, simple things like this. And we hear over and over again the same sort of advice about people focusing on release and things like back tension, but they have core elements of their posture and structure wrong.
Couldn't agree more.
It's good to know. Okay, the second thing that I think archers get wrong at a lot of levels is that they focus on bow poundage, and then they try and fix their form through shooting volume. So they go like strength first, and then they shoot volume, and then they try and improve their technique. But it's backwards. It needs to go technique, then volume, then strength.
And it rings a bell on how they do it in Korea.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And so my advice is that for, all archers, this is agnostic about your skill level, is that if you're building yourself as an archer, you need to first focus on the technique. And if you can't get it right on a stretchy band or a training bow that's 10 pounds or something, what do you think the probability is of doing it on a competition bow? Like it's 0, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen.
Totally unrealistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course this is true. And if you look at other sports, this structure is followed almost, it's self-evident. If you go to even weightlifting, a sport that is ultimately about lifting the heaviest weight possible. Do you know how they teach you weightlifting technique?
With a PVC
Yeah,
pipe.
maybe a broomstick.
Yeah.
And you know, you learn the movement patterns, and then you do the repetition, and then obviously the load is added and the strength is built as the step. And in archery as well, if you follow this approach and you get the technique right on a low complexity environment like a light training bow or a TheraBand, and then you build up the repetition, you get the volume in, and then you add the strength. Moving up in poundage is very easy at that point, and your structure isn't going to crumble under that load, and you avoid baking in a lot of bad habits that we have to then untrain later as well.
Hmm. I absolutely love that you mentioned weightlifting. I have to say that when you mentioned other sports, the thing that instantly came to my mind was weightlifting.
Oh, really?
And then when you started speaking about it, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Because I've practiced a bit of weightlifting. I used to go to a weightlifting training when I was back in Brazil. This is something I terribly miss because I loved it. And it's funny because I think that mentally it is so similar to archery, but then this is a whole 1 hour conversation that we can drift off to. But the very interesting thing is the coach with whom I was training, he was saying that in weightlifting there are a lot of people who say, no, but coach, you know, my technique is better when I have the bar with some weight, because yes, it is theoretically a little bit easier to perform the lift as it should when you have some weight on it, because the PVC pipe is so easy to move around the broomstick, so it feels really artificial. But he showed us a video of a Brazilian athlete, a girl who was like one of the top performing weightlifters in Brazil. She got some medals in World Cups or something, and it was a video of her, and she was answering to questions that people submitted through social media. And she was saying, she couldn't stress it enough, she was saying that if you cannot do proper technique with the broomstick or the PVC pipe, then you're not going to do it properly with very heavy weights with a bar. So she was saying exactly the same thing as you've saying about archery.
Yes, and I think as well, this is psychologically challenging for a lot of amateur archers, because one thing is understanding what to do, and the other thing is knowing how to do it. And so imagine you're trying to achieve a certain technique, and then you can't do it on a pipe bow, or you're not quite getting it right. Well, then what? You know, there's no path forward. If you don't have the support and the coaching and the understanding of how to do it, then it's actually disheartening. And so people are, I think, understandably at that point, reluctant to, you know, take this big step back without a clear path forward. And I think that's where it comes from. But then I've found in my own coaching, when we work with this, it's not demotivating for archers when they see progress. And even if the progress is in the short term incremental and marginal, that if they understand what they're working towards achieving and they know how to do it, even if they haven't got it right away, they can see the path forward. They will do it, and they'll follow through. And that's one thing that I think is different in coaching, let's say, Western archers than, say, Koreans, is that they might just do it and have to do it because they're told. But in my coaching environment, people are paying me to coach them. They're not on scholarship, and I'm not the boss of them. So they have to be, you know, you have to also, to some degree, cultivate their own internal motivation.
The athlete has to buy into what you're telling them to do, right?
100%.
So the importance of explaining why we're doing this.
Yeah, and they have to get it. So that kind of brings on to the third mistake that I think archers make.
Absolutely.
Because we're talking about like the way of learning, and I think a lot of people just focus on shooting, and they don't give the attention to the technical drills. And I think this is more important for amateur archers who are like at a development level, because amateur archers are time poor. So you can't just shoot, you know, 500 hours a day and get it out. You have to isolate skill components and then accelerate the learning curve on that component and then integrate it into the shot process. And the best way to do that is through training drills. And
Such as?
oh, pick a skill, mate. We there's multiple drills for each little skill. Um, so for example, one of the core components of back tension, right, is scapular control. Okay. And so a lot of archers, they're shooting and then they're thinking, all right, back tension, back tension, back tension, and they're just trying to squeeze their back muscles. And it's not correct. They're not doing it right because they don't have the prerequisite scapular control in order to do that skill. So what you need to do is you need to actually pull them off the bow, put them on a TheraBand or something, and get them to do some isolation exercises, learning the articulation of the scapula through the right planes of motion, learning the like concentric and isometric and then eccentric control through like the ranges of motion. And then you do it on a pipe bow or a training bow so that they can get it within the shot process, and then they can start to have success within their shooting. But you have to be prepared to and understand how to isolate the skill you're trying to improve and then use drills specific to that skill. And like we talked about weightlifting, but again, in other sports are so much better at this than archers. So the one that comes to mind is boxing, right? And in boxing, everything is a drill. Like they hardly do any sparring or actual fighting. So, and if you took up boxing today, you could expect to do months and months and months of drills on footwork and skipping and, you know, bag work and pads and all sorts of different things before you would ever expect to throw a punch with the intent of hitting someone. And I think of archery is very analogous to this where, you know, because all the skill is internal, you know, amateur archers should really have a deep understanding of the drills that can accelerate their learning curve.
It's fascinating what you mentioned about boxing. What it got me thinking was, and well, this just goes back to a conversation I heard a long time ago, but in archery, because it's not a contact sport, it's not even a sport where you are, let's say, directly interacting with your opponent, like we talk a lot about. You know, it's just you against yourself, try to zone out everything around you. And some of the best matches I had in my life, it was almost like I ignored my opponent. And so I was just doing my own thing. Yeah. And then you just get into that rhythm and flow and everything. But there can be a downside of this, which is the fact that then you can start to get away with some of these bad habits because then it's only about myself. You know what I mean? Because in the boxing, if you're not ready and then you go up and spar and fight with someone, you can get badly injured because you were not ready for that, period. And so you need to put in all that preparation to be ready. Otherwise, physically, you will get badly injured. While in archery, people tend to get away with all these things, and the worst that can happen is they miss the target.
I've never thought about it like that before. You're saying there's less obvious consequence for this because
exactly,
you know, if you have to return a serve from Roger Federer, you're going to know if it's not working. But in archery, you know, you can just shoot a target, and you could be on the target next to Kim Woo-jin, and you can still just be shooting a target. And I don't know. Yeah, I've never thought about it like that before. That's interesting.
Glad I was able to add something.
Yeah.
I hope.
I'm going to marinate on that.
But anyway, the importance of the drills and. Again, I absolutely loved what you said in the beginning about, you know, the sexy part of the shots, and drills are definitely not a sexy part of the training.
I mean, that's a matter of perspective. I think a lot of archers feel that way, but I think that's an incredibly immature approach because, like I said, I think what's the sexy part of the training is like the results. And the results speak for themselves. And, you know, it's been interesting to see this locally, right? Because my squad does quite well. And I remember when I was first building my team, we were the only people that did a structured warm up, right? And maybe some other people swing their arms around or they have their own thing, but we would like get together at the start of the training and or at the start of a competition, and we would get in a circle, we'd do a team warm up, and then we'd do a big, you know, war cry or whatever, and then off we go to start shooting. And at first people were like, what the hell are these guys doing? You know, it's almost making fun of us. And it's interesting to see now that, okay, you got some results on the board. Other people are starting to warm up, and it started to kind of catch on. And I think that's really nice to see that you can start to influence, even indirectly, people's perception of proper training. So I don't know. I think if most archers got exposure to the right training structure, they would wholeheartedly implement that.
A training structure that has a purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it is.
So the other thing that I think is another mistake is
that's mistake number 4.
This is mistake number 4, is that archers don't integrate mental training or don't understand the components of mental skills early in their process, and that they only think of the archery mindset as the final moment when you're standing there doing a shoot-off for the gold medal, and that's the only component of mental training, right? And that's the most obvious one, especially if you're watching matches online and things. That's what you see. But that you will never get to that match to find out what that's like if you don't master dozens of other mental skills, and mental training starts on day 1. So that's one thing that I think is important. And everything from training discipline, learning how to plan a training session, learning how to train with intention, that's a mental skill. Consistency, okay? Even if your motivation will wax and wane, then, will you actually show up and put in the effort? You mentioned before, the term I would use is process focus, right? Where you're not so drawn to the outcome, and you're not maybe worried about even your own outcome, let alone your opponent's outcome on the target or the score. You don't start adding up scores and projecting your average and thinking, okay, I just need a couple of 54s to hit a certain score in my ranking round, but you can keep the process focus internal. That's a foundational mental skill for archery. Communication. If you can't communicate with your coaches and your peers, if you can't cultivate support from, you might have to negotiate time off from work or school in order to go and compete, and that's a mental skill too, right? Problem solving. There's so many things that you need to be able to develop as an archer before you even step on the finals field. And I think these things need to be built into like training and development structures from day 1 as well.
So interesting. It's much more holistic then, right?
I know.
It's not only delivering and performing, it's everything.
Yeah. And I know because we've talked about this before, but I think you have a similar philosophy that, archery is a sport of like deep personal growth. Because of that it's just you and the bow, ultimately, that it does require that self-mastery. And that's what makes it so challenging in many ways, but it's also very rewarding when you get that progress. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I look, people might think that, I don't know, there is a bias or something going on here, but I sign under, I 100% agree with everything you're saying, and I'm finding it so fascinating. So all I can do is just be here and be like 100%. Yeah, Jarryd, I 100% agree with you, because I buy 100% everything you're saying.
Well, that's good to know. I must be selling it right. So
you are.
So the 5th mistake that I think a lot of archers do is that they operate within their comfort zone a lot, and this is a mistake that I made, and that they withhold themselves from exposing themselves to challenges or opportunities to fail until they feel that they're completely 100% ready. And I would say that it's very important for archers to regularly and pretty early on expose yourself to higher levels of competition. Um, and if you're winning all the competitions you're doing, you're in the wrong competitions. You need to go up a league, and you need to find more challenging opponents, and you need to put yourself in those competitions, because this is something that I learned that I think, uh, curious on your perspective, but this is why Korea's number one, is because those guys come from a deeply competitive league where by the time we see them on World Cups or whatever, they've already been competing for several years at international level of competition domestically. And that comes all the way from the ground up, from their middle school to high school programs, and then they got to compete for scholarships to university teams and get on professional squads, and then so all the way through they're exposed to high level competition. And it's not the technique that is creating these incredible archers. It's, yes, the technique's there, but it's actually the highly competitive environment. And this is not just archery, this is anything in the world. You get these clusters of high intense competition, and then high performers emerge from that. So I think that's very important.
I see Korea as the survival of the fittest, right?
Yeah.
When you see a new Korean face, a new Korean name in the national team, they have been proven domestically, and they have been through so much to be there. And just the simple fact that they've made it to the national team is proof that they have what it takes and that they're ready. There's an example closer to home, to Brazil, that I really like to mention every time, is Mexico. I see Mexico like that. They have like this huge pool of athletes, and then they have enormous competition. And so when you see a new Mexican come into the national team, it's like very likely
they're going to be solid.
They have what it takes to be there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is one thing that is sometimes challenging. I know in Australia, and for me, because it's so big, it's really hard to cultivate that. And what I'm trying to do at the moment within my squad is, there is not that density of competition, so we have to create it, and we're doing that by building archers from the ground up to try and create competitive leagues. And then, well, through my new club, we're doing that, which has been really cool. But yeah, I think whatever level you're at, exposing yourself to high level competition is critical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Striking that balance between the challenge, a competition that feels challenging to you, but not being on the comfort zone, but also not exposing yourself to being miles behind the leading athletes. That is also somewhat of a challenge, right? Striking that balance.
Yeah, and that could be quite personal as well. Like, I know for my personality, I'm super competitive. So if I see people in front of me, that's motivating. And I know I do well when I'm chasing someone, or when there's people to that kind of pull me in their wake, if you know what I mean. But I can see how that could be challenging for people. It could challenge, especially if you have a strong self-identity that's built up around, being the top dog, for example, or winning and being the best. People generally act to realize that self-identity, and it can be confronting. But I think if you're aspiring towards higher levels of attainment and the top levels of performance, you have to let that go, and you have to humble yourself and expose yourself to the big dogs who can challenge you.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just saying that more in the context of, like, for example, Poland 2013, when we met the World Cup. I don't remember exactly who won in terms of individual, but Koreans were there. They won the team round. You and we were competing against the Koreans at that occasion. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like I was competing with them, because they were just so far ahead, and it feels like it's
unattainable.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So this is what I meant in terms of the motivation of having competing against someone who I know is ahead of me, but then I feel like, I see the steps to get to that place, but then if it's just too far ahead, it can be a bit demotivating for some people. That's what I mean.
Oh yeah, 100%. I get it.
Yeah. So Then the 5 most common mistakes that you mentioned were people focusing too much. Number 1 on the sexy parts of the shot, the things that are very visual, but then not working on the foundations. Number 2, poundage before developing the technique or the training volume, like people getting this order not exactly right. 3, not doing drills for technique, not doing the proper drills. 4, not working on the mental aspect. And what I really enjoyed about what you said was actually taking the mental side of it. It's much broader than just performing. And number 5, getting out of your comfort zone. Did I miss anything?
No, you nailed it, 100%.
Man, I'm surprised with how quickly time has passed. And we were talking about this, and we could go on for much longer. But there are other stuff that I want to touch on before we advance here in the show. But then you mentioned several times your squad, your team, and so now you have your own club. How did this get started? So you went on the search for knowledge and try to develop yourself and understand. And then when did the idea come of like, you know what, I'm starting my own academy?
Yeah, for sure. So the biggest motivation for me to start Rogue Archery was I really wanted to create something that I wish was there for me. There was always this understanding of the structural problems and what's lacking to support archers who are aspirational and want to work to higher levels of attainment. And I'm a bit of a problem solver by nature, so it was just natural for me to kind of see a problem and then try and fill that void. And it was also I don't often talk about this publicly, but it was some challenges with some incredible toxicity within the political culture of the archery club I was at, and that really affected my archery career as well, because that undermined a lot of what I was trying to achieve, but it made coaching incredibly difficult within that environment. So really, to pursue what I wanted to create, I had to go rogue, and that's why it's called Rogue Archery. And basically looked at breaking out and creating Rogue Archery as an independent coaching academy, rather than having to operate within the constraints of the political environment of the club I was in. And so that's what I did. And it started off literally as just running some community classes, and part of it was about supporting myself, because I was trying to train, but there was no financial support. And so I had this juggling act between, how do I train and support myself to train and be able to afford equipment and go off to competitions? It's expensive and still put food on the table and everything, but I've still got to work to do that, and I don't have time to actually train. So I had this idea of trying to run courses and support myself to go to high level competition, and I didn't realize that I was creating a lot of work for myself in doing that, but it's really blossomed. And now we've got like a 7-person coaching team, and we run like 5 different programs where we see like 160 archers each week, and we operate across like 3 locations, and it's going really well. And we've got squads at different levels, from beginners to our rookies, which is like our intermediate squad. And then we have our development squad, and also our competitive archers who are starting to get pretty good. So it's evolved over time. But that was my biggest motivation, is to create what I wish was there for me.
And if you ever had, when did you have this click of coaching? Because I look at you, to me it seems like you're so passionate, you're so driven, like it means so much to you. Have you ever saw yourself as a coach, or this is something that's happened slowly, or there was a click? How did this happen?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. even from when I was pretty early on in my archery journey, I was still coaching, but it was like one guy. I was training and then I would help out my friend, and I was coaching that way. And it was really actually around that time, around 2012, 2013, that I started to do a bit more structured coaching. And then I would coach, half a dozen people, and I would run a training session once a week for them. And then they started to get better. And so then more people got interested. And then I was coaching like 2 dozen people. And then, it got a bit out of hand, and I had to like figure out how to manage that. And but then slowly over time, it's built up to the point where I've now been able to make that career transition away from my engineering career into like professional archery coach within my own private academy. Um, so that's something I don't take for granted. It's very challenging though, and it's taken a long time to get it to that stage. But yeah, you're right. It is 100% a passion project and something that I'm passionate about. But I wouldn't say it's for everyone because it's like, okay, this is a bit more philosophical, but people say you
Go on, bring it on.
yeah, okay, I know you're down. So people say you have to be passionate about what you do, right? And I always misinterpreted this. I always thought that means that you should do what you're passionate about. But it's not, it's the other way around. You have to be passionate if you're going to pursue some audacious goal, because when it gets hard and everyone's saying, what are you doing this for? They don't understand. And you're not making any money. And you're stacking a few losses in a row. And if you're not passionate, you'll give up and you'll never make it. And you have to have that um, stubbornness to be able to go, no, screw it. I'm doing it anyway. And that's the only way you can really succeed in something like that. So I think that's what it means when people say, or when it's said that you have to be passionate, because otherwise you're not going to make it in something like that.
I think this serves as inspiration for maybe a lot of people out there, because this sounds a bit not the traditional way. You were an engineer and then you transitioned to running your own archery academy. This sounds like a pretty bold move. And so to see that you're doing it, and to be fair and to be clear here, you're saying that it's a lot of work, and I imagine, yes, it is by no means easy, but as you were saying, if you're passionate about it, then you can go through the very hard moments and find the enjoyment and the fulfillment.
Yeah, and if anyone listening is thinking about doing a similar thing, uh, on this note, I would say don't do it. And two things will come to mind. One, you'll either think, oh, yeah, you know what? Okay, I probably shouldn't do it. Or two, you'll think, screw you, I'm going to do it anyway. And that's the right attitude. That's the attitude you need.
A little test
Yeah,
to see how much you want to do it.
exactly.
I love that. Before we move on to another segment of the show where I ask some quick fire questions, I just really didn't want to miss this one. You live in Brisbane, Australia, and 2032, that's where the Olympic Games will take place. And how do you see that? What's the vibe around, or is it too early? But how do you feel about the Olympics coming home to you?
Yeah, it's very exciting. There's a lot of opportunities that it's created being a home games. I mean, you'll understand ahead of Rio, right? You would have seen some of the things that's happening. Um, it is still pretty early to the point where it's not quite really like we haven't started to see all the infrastructure come together and everything yet in Brisbane. But for example, I've got a lot of students who are young and going to be ripening into their athletic careers and have this as their goal. So the prospects of potentially creating some homegrown Olympians in Brisbane is very exciting. And we're also leveraging this. I've just set up a new not-for-profit club as well here. And so we're leveraging this into establishing this as really a training and development center in Brisbane, where we hope Whether or not, we could host the games there is one thing, but whether we can certainly look at like welcoming teams ahead of the games and hosting training camps and clinics and that sort of thing, as well as like creating, like I said, this scaling up our pathway programs and creating into a hub in the region, because that doesn't exist in archery at the moment. So it's creating a lot of opportunities for that sort of thing.
Very interesting what you said about maybe creating this developing the home talent from Brisbane, the local talent, into potentially being at the games there. I feel that was exactly how it was for me. To be very, very honest here, I never really thought or saw myself as an Olympic archer. But then in 2009, the games, it was decided that in 2016, they were going to be held in Brazil, in Rio. And I was going to be 23 when the time came. And I just felt like I was the right person at the right place at the right time. I felt like all the stars aligned, and that almost made the decision for me. But then along the way, I fell in love with all of it and everything that was involved. And I was like, there is no way I'm going to stop in 2016. I want to go beyond that. And what a journey it has been.
So can I ask you a question? I know you're meant to be interviewing me, but what was it that made you fall in love with it? I mean, what was the moment for you?
Wow, that's a good one. I think the self-mastery that you touched on before. It's this never-ending pursuit for perfection. You shoot, even if you shoot a perfect arrow, it's not enough, because you want to do it again. And then if you shoot 2 perfect arrows, then you want to shoot a third one. And then if you shoot a very good end, you want to shoot. So it's never ending. And sometimes in practice or in competition, some of the moments where the shot felt amazing and I was really in a flow, my God, it's got to be one of the best feelings I've ever had in my life.
100%.
So I think that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's addictive, isn't it?
It is. It is a good addiction.
And you said before, you were just thinking 100%. And as you're saying that you said the words, the pursuit of perfection. And I've said this before as well, that archery is the pursuit of perfection with the understanding you can never be perfect. Mm-hmm. But it's the pursuit, and that's what it's about.
Yeah. Inching ever closer, just getting closer, and yeah, just taking so much enjoyment out of that. All right. Well, as I said again, we could go on for much, much longer, but I always finish with some quick fire questions here in the show. And there is one segment that I like to play around a little bit. It is build the perfect archer.
Okay.
So I'm gonna name a few aspects of the shot, and I want you to tell me who you think the best archer in the world is in that aspect. It can be present or past. Can be yourself if you think that you are the best person you've ever seen in this
Clearly, yeah.
aspect. The first one is bow arm.
So this is an interesting question, because my approach to looking at archery technique has been, and developing what I teach, has been looking at the top archers and trying to look through all the different idiosyncrasies of style and different coaching doctrines, and try and look at consistent performers and identify what they do the same rather than what they do differently. Mm-hmm. And so there's so many archers that are like really technically sound now and are really good. So it's hard to say like one person who's got perfect technique, but there's definitely some ones that I think are interesting and instructive to look at. So in terms of the front bow arm, you might know, like I have quite a hypermobile front arm, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So for people listening, hypermobility is where the joint has a larger than normal range of motion. And so the hypermobile elbow, it's very common, but it's where the joint extends beyond 180 degrees. And this is a little challenging when you're teaching these archers sometimes because there's the clearance issue on the string, and also the most stable position to set an arm that has a larger range of motion. And there's a couple of really good archers that do this. The first one is Jung Yong-ho, who's a two-time Olympic gold medalist.
Yeah, I remember him.
Okay,
early 2000s.
yeah, and he has a very hypermobile arm, but he has a very high degree of internal rotation. Okay, and that's really interesting. And then the other person who's hypermobile, this is not, I don't teach this way, but the person who's most interesting at the front arm is Lim Sion. Have you
that's
looked at the way she sets her front arm closely?
No, I'm trying to remember, but not really.
I saw her in person in Korea. I'm friends with her coach, and I met her before she was winning World Cups and stuff. And I had a look at her, the way she set her front arm, and she was doing something so interesting that I'd never seen before, because she's got a hypermobile elbow. Okay, but I used to say that it was impossible to do this until I saw her. She sets the arm in like a pre-draw position where she pauses and she checks her structure, and the arm is actually not locked. It's not fully extended. It's essentially braced, but in a slightly. It looks straight, but in a hypermobile elbow, that means it's unlocked, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then from there she flows through her shot process like very quick shots. And then after the shot breaks, the arm fully extends, and it again, you can see the hypermobility. And she's the only archer I've ever seen who's really good, who can actually pull that off. So I don't know if that's even possible for mortals like us, but in terms of hypermobile archers, she's the most interesting. And then someone who's got a really strong front arm that I think is really solid is Kang Chae-yong. I think she's just super solid on the front.
Mm-hmm. The Destroyer.
The Destroyer.
I love all the examples you've brought. Very, very interesting. Up next, release and follow through.
Kim Woo-jin. Just his release is buttery smooth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It feels like he's shooting 20 pounds, right?
Yeah, it's amazing how he draws the bow with no tension in his hand. It's beautiful to look at, and I think, yeah, that's what I show his video to people when I'm trying to demonstrate the intent behind the release of drawing the bow without adding tension to the hand or manipulating the hand shape or the string in any way. I think he's just got the best one I've seen.
Mental toughness.
Okay, so the first name that comes to mind is William Tell.
William Tell. Tell me more about
it. Are you familiar with the legend?
Swiss.
Yeah, the
Swiss guy.
Swiss
right?
legend, right?
The shot with a crossbow, shot on the apple over someone's head.
He had to shoot an apple off his son's head. And the reason why this one comes to mind is because if he had to shoot an apple off a fence post, we wouldn't be talking about this, right? And it would not have become a legend. What makes it resonate with people, you don't even have to be an archer to understand this, is the consequence, which is shooting an apple off his son's head. It's not the shooting of the apple that's important. It's the consequence of missing, which is killing your son. And that's the scenario where, the mental resilience and the ability to execute with confidence is of the highest stakes. And so when we think about shooting for a medal and you think that's high pressure, I mean, that's just a whole nother level, right? Now, I know that's a legend, but we can look at examples where you've seen mental resilience and mental toughness at the top level. And a specific match comes to mind is actually the Rio individual men's gold final with Kubon Chan. You would have been there for that.
I was there. Yeah, I was watching it from the grandstand. Yeah.
So if you remember, Kubon Chan thought he won the match. I think after the third or fourth set, he was up, and then a line call went against him. But when he thought he...
Yeah, I think it could have been 6-2, but it ended up being 5-1.
Yes. So, but when he thought he won, he let his guard down and he started celebrating. And then the line call came back and he had to recompose himself in the gold medal final of the Olympics when you already think you've won. And so it's one
Hmm.
thing to hold up, your shield, but then to lower it and have to pick it up again. And the next set he lost to a 30, but he came back and
Hmm.
won. And I think it's not that he didn't get rocked, he did. You could see the nerves affect him. But to be able to come back and actually come back with the win, I think that's iconic. That was really a memorable match for me in terms of mental toughness.
I remember telling my family, I said, look, this can be pivotal in this final because I've seen a lot of matches where someone is winning 5-1 and then whoever's losing was manages to make a comeback, and then this can just destroy whoever was leading because then you might feel like you have everything to lose. But it's not what happened there for Kubon Chan. But the interesting thing, and to me, it's really striking when I watch this final again on YouTube or whatever. You can clearly see how nervous he was. Like it's on his
Yep.
face. I think few times I have seen a match where you see one of the archers, he is terrified,
Yes.
and it didn't matter because he went on and he delivered and he won the Olympics.
Yeah, and it really, I think it's instructive because a lot of people have this perception that you must be in obviously this emotionally neutral state, which is great, but feeling nervous is normal, and a lot of people can point to an example if you ask them of a time when they felt nervous, but they actually performed anyway. And you can rely on your training and actually you know what to actually do. The medal is not given to the person who feels the most confident. It's the person who actually puts them in the middle. And if you know what to do, regardless of how you're feeling is, even though it's uncomfortable, there's no rule that's written saying you can't still perform. So yeah,
This is 100% agree with what you're saying. This is a mistake I've made for such a long time. Just this illusion that I should be able to find this state where I don't feel nervous and where I feel under everything is under my control. So long time kind of wasted trying to achieve that, and then realizing in the end that being nervous doesn't hold you, does not mean that you cannot perform.
yeah, and it has this negative feedback loop where you feel nervous and you think, oh no, I'm nervous. I shouldn't feel nervous. Quickly, stop feeling nervous. And then feeling nervous makes you feel nervous, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you can just sort of
Yeah.
accept the emotional, yeah, okay, yes, stoicism, and yes, emotional regulation and bringing it back to neutral is the intent. But it's okay. You can let these things happen, and like I said, there's no rule written that you must shoot badly if you feel a certain way.
100%. Up next, shooting in the wind.
Uh, Ojin Hek comes to mind. Um, I mean, I don't know that it's a bit hard to say without. I don't know who comes to mind for you. I'm really curious in shooting in the wind.
Marcus Dalmeida.
He's good, is he?
Yeah, he's really good in the wind. Brady Allison.
Hmm.
I, you know, I'm a big fan of motorsports, and I see that in archery, when it's really windy in a competition, it's like when it's raining in a Formula One race, where it really shuffles the field, but then some of the best, they get even better. The difference increases even more because that's where you can show your skills even more. And so yeah, Brady, Marcus, Kimujin as well, but I would say more Brady and Marcus.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing is, this is an outdoor sport, and so you're shooting in the wind is an opportunity to gain an edge on your competitors if you can do it well. And I think having that mindset as well, like yes, there's a technical component of shooting in the wind, um, but I think also the mental aspect of how you approach it is is something that I've seen a lot of archers crumble on, where they hold on to um, preferences for things that are out of their control. Like, oh, I hope it's not windy, or I hope,
Mm.
yeah, hey, you can hope all you like, but sorry,
Yeah,
mate,
yeah.
it's going to be what it's going to be. And short of brewing a rain dance,
The-
you can't control the weather, so you just get on with it. Yeah,
yeah, the earth doesn't care about what you like or what you don't like.
that's right.
Last one in this one is just a overall best of all time, in your opinion.
Overall best. I mean, Park Sung-hyun. She's a legend,
Oh,
right?
spot on,
But
spot on. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
also like Kim Woo-jin would have to be in that conversation. I mean, with his career, mate, is as good as it gets. So
And he's not done.
he's not exactly. I'm loath to pick all Koreans, but they're just when you got so many to pick from, performing at the top level for so long, it's just a lot of examples, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Now, other quick fire questions going past Build the Perfect Archer. Named after the show, the Shoot-Off Archery Podcast. What is your most memorable shoot-off? One that you shot or one that you've seen?
One that I've shot is definitely the first one I can remember, which is it was actually I won my first national title in a shoot-off, and that was the moment when I was hooked, and I was like, I'm an archer now, like for life. So that is maybe not the biggest victory I've ever had, but that was definitely the one where it was the most memorable, and that left an impact on me for sure.
And was it a 10?
It was a 10, yeah. And it was windy. Yes.
Oh, there you
So,
go. There you go.
yeah.
All right. What's the worst advice you've ever received in the sport?
Oh man, the worst advice. I mean, the worst advice is just things like, don't do that. Don't do it that way. Like what not to do, rather than anything productive. And again, that like, if I think about this, like I come up with a few examples, but I talk about how I had a hypermobile elbow, and so early on, there'll be coaches come up to me and just say, "Oh, just don't do that. It's the way I am. What am I meant to do about that?" And then, so that was disheartening as well as wrong, and so that's pretty bad. And I think, those coaches, if they didn't understand or they didn't know the way, that's okay. You've got to take a curious mind in coaching, and it's really an exercise in problem solving rather than knowing everything. And if they took the approach of like working with me to understand the archer, then that would have been much more productive. But yeah, that kind of advice I think is very bad because it is not only can send someone in the wrong direction, but can also be very disheartening for them.
Mm-hmm. Coffee before shooting, yes or no?
If you normally drink coffee, yes. If you don't, no. So caffeine,
Simple.
yeah. Is that what you were going to say?
No. Go on.
Yeah. If you normally drink caffeine, the body becomes it regulates your energy to expect it. So people who drink a lot of coffee become very dependent on it. This is a bad thing. But if you normally drink coffee every morning, and then, for example, you abstain from coffee right before you start shooting, that might actually have some negative impacts. Whereas if you don't normally drink coffee and then you have coffee, then it's going to be a problem. So I would say you should generally regulate your caffeine intake. Coffee might be one thing, but don't suck on those sugary energy drinks. Like that's a problem. And then just be consistent. And if you have one cup of coffee in the morning, that's probably fine. If you normally do, that's my thinking.
What is your comfort food?
Comfort food. I really like steak. Cooking steak. I don't know if that's a comfort food though, but
Well, it can be.
yeah, like going to the butcher and then picking out a nice cut and then getting it and cooking it nicely and then actually eating it. That's something that has a bit of science in it and it's a bit therapeutic for me. So yeah.
The famous Aussie Aussie barbecue.
Yeah, when you come to Australia, Bernardo, I'll cook you a steak. But Brazilian
Oh
barbecue
my
though is
God.
fantastic.
It is very good and famous. But I would love to go to Australia. And this brings the next question, because Australia is one of my dream vacation destinations. What is your dream vacation destination?
So I've done a lot of traveling, and I love nature. So I'm not a big city guy. I've done a lot of traveling to cities, but I wouldn't say pick a relaxing holiday and go to like London or New York or something. I like getting out and going on multi-day treks or going scuba diving on somewhere or whatever, climbing mountains. So I like that sort of thing. And I've done a lot of trekking in New Zealand, which is super special, um, and I recommend it. But one thing I haven't actually done, it sounds weird, but Australia is so big. I want to do a lap of Australia, but you probably need to dedicate at least 6 months to 12 months to do it properly and see all of Australia. Because
You mean
Australia's,
driving?
yeah, where you drive it and you see there's so many different ecosystems and natural wonders that are different. Um, it's like if you went to continental Europe, there's just so much to see, right? Because
Hmm.
I've seen lots of Australia, but there's so much that I haven't, and because I'm Australian, I that's on my bucket list.
Cool. Do you have any hobbies or pets?
Yeah, I have a little dog, and you might be able to hear him yapping in the background. He's a menace. Um,
Yeah,
so hopefully that,
just now.
yeah, on cue. He's senile and old, and so now he's starting to lose his hearing and go a bit crazy. But anyway, he's a cutie, and we love him. But hobbies, yeah, I've kind of mentioned. I like hiking. I like getting out and like paddle boarding. I like scuba diving. I like all that sort of stuff.
You're in the right place for that, in
Exactly.
Australia. A movie and or book recommendation can be archery related or not.
Yeah, a great movie I'd recommend that a lot of people haven't seen is The World's Fastest Indian. I don't know if you've heard of this one before.
Never.
It's very inspirational, and anyone who's pursuing like a passion should really watch this movie, The World's Fastest Indian, and highly
Okay.
recommend that. And that's a bit of a cult movie, so not a lot of people have seen it. And then what was the next part?
Book recommendation.
Book. There's so many books. I've got like a whole bookshelf behind me. Like I recently read Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. That was good. That's a book about
Why zebras don't get what?
don't get ulcers, like stomach ulcers. And it's a book about the stress response in the human body. And that's something that's very interesting. It's definitely something if you have a scientific mind, or if you're interested in health generally and longevity, then that's a fascinating book, really well written. Um, and then the other book that comes to mind is The One Thing, which is a productivity type book, but it helps to prior when you have multiple priorities, it helps you to give you a bit of a structure for how to prioritize the one thing.
The author of both books?
Ooh, I would have to look it up. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Yeah. No, no worries. Last one. A song and why?
A song, that's a bit trickier. Um, Don't worry, be happy, and that's why as well.
No further explanation needed.
Yeah, that's the song name is the explanation. Yeah.
Yeah, self-explaining. Well, Jarryd, this brings us to the end then of this episode. Time has flew by, and I've said this to other guests, but this applies to you 100% is we're going to have to do this again because so many things we didn't talk about, and it's really fascinating. Once again, it's for me, it's so nice to look back and remember when we first met and the fact that we stayed in touch somehow for such a long time. Then we met again last year and we're having this conversation here. And from a distance, I follow your work and it's really inspiring. For the people who are watching, how can they follow you and follow your work?
The best way is to check out just Rogue Archery on the socials. So obviously there's the YouTube channel where we have a lot of instructional content, and then through Instagram and Facebook as well. It's for sort of more, you know, periodic updates on what we're doing on a daily basis. So yeah, get in touch.
Great, man. Thank you so much once again, Jarryd. It's been a huge pleasure, and I hope to speak to you soon.
Awesome talking with Bernardo. We'll have to do this before another 12 years comes past.
Yeah, please. All right, wonderful. Thanks a lot, Jarryd. Now, everyone, thank you once again for tuning in, for supporting the show, and for your audience. In fact, as always, feel free to reach out if you have comments, suggestions, or just want to give some feedback. You can find the show's socials handle on the description. Also, I'm going to leave Jarryd's and Rogue Archery's handles and how you can find them on the description as well. Now, I have something exciting to share with you. Is on Sunday, April 12th, I'm going to do a live here on YouTube right after the first stage of the Archery World Cup finishes in Puebla, Mexico. I'm going to be bringing my analysis and just my take on everything that happened on the season opener. So hopefully that's going to be really, really exciting, and I'd be stoked to have you here with me. As always, if you like the show, please subscribe, like, share, and spread the word with everyone you know. This is the Shoot-Off Archery Podcast. I'm Bernardo Oliveira. Thank you for your company.